Gather close, for history remembers what the world has forgotten. In the year 845, the Frankish Empire stretched across much of what we now call Western Europe. Charlemagne's heirs ruled from grand palaces, convinced their Christian realm was divinely protected. The Seine River flowed peacefully through their heartland, carrying merchant vessels laden with goods toward the growing city of Paris. But far to the north, in the fjords of Scandinavia, a different world was stirring. Here, among the Vikings, warfare was both craft and calling.
Wait. The Franks had no idea what was coming.
None whatsoever. They'd heard whispers of northern raiders, but Paris seemed impossibly distant from any real threat. The city sat on an island in the Seine, surrounded by water, protected by what they believed were impenetrable defenses. The man who would shatter their complacency was already a legend among his own people, Ragnar Lothbrok, though whether Lothbrok was his true name or earned title remains debated by scholars. What we know with certainty is that he possessed a mind for warfare unlike any of his contemporaries. While other Viking leaders launched scattered raids for quick plunder, Ragnar studied his enemies with the patience of a chess master. He understood that the greatest victories came not from brute force, but from exploiting an opponent's assumptions about their own security.
How did he even know about Paris?
Trade routes, captured merchants, and years of careful intelligence gathering. The Vikings weren't the savage barbarians Christian chroniclers portrayed. They were sophisticated seafarers who understood that information was as valuable as silver. By early 845, word spread through the northern settlements that Ragnar was assembling something unprecedented. Not merely a raiding party, but a fleet that would carry an entire army deep into the Christian heartland. The longships themselves were marvels of engineering, shallow drafted vessels that could navigate both open seas and inland rivers with equal ease. Each could carry 30 to 50 warriors, along with their weapons, armor, and supplies for extended campaigns.
Hold on, over 100 ships?
Contemporary Frankish sources report 120 ships. If accurate, that meant nearly 5,000 Viking warriors converging on a single target, the largest military force ever assembled for a Viking expedition. In March 845, this unprecedented armada set sail from Denmark. Their route would take them around the coast of modern Netherlands, then up the Seine River toward the very heart of Frankish power. The journey itself demonstrated Ragnar's strategic thinking. Rather than announcing their presence with coastal raids, the fleet moved with unusual stealth. They wanted to penetrate as deeply as possible before the Franks could organize resistance. Villages along the Seine continued their daily routines, unaware that death was approaching from the water.
The Franks still didn't know they were coming.
Not until it was far too late. By the time warning reached the Frankish authorities, Ragnar's fleet was already past the point where they could be stopped by conventional means. Paris in 845 was not the grand city we know today. The main settlement occupied the Ile de la Cité, a natural fortress surrounded by the Seine's waters. 2 bridges connected the island to the mainland, and these bridges represented both Paris's strength and its vulnerability. King Charles the Bald, Charlemagne's grandson, faced an impossible decision when reports reached his court. His army was scattered across the empire, dealing with internal rebellions and other threats. He could not possibly assemble sufficient forces to meet Ragnar's army in open battle. The king's advisors proposed blocking the Seine with a fortified garrison, but Charles made a fateful choice. He split his available forces, positioning part of his army on the north bank of the Seine, part on the south.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
It was worse than terrible. It was exactly what Ragnar had hoped for. On March 28, 845, Ragnar's fleet appeared around the bend of the Seine like a vision from nightmare. The sight that greeted Frankish defenders defied their worst fears. But Ragnar didn't immediately attack Paris. Instead, he demonstrated the tactical brilliance that made him legendary. He identified the weaker of the 2 Frankish armies, the force positioned on the north bank, and focused his entire strength against it. The assault was swift and merciless. Frankish infantry, trained for traditional European warfare, found themselves completely unprepared for Viking combat tactics. The northern Frankish army collapsed within hours. Those who survived fled in panic, abandoning their positions and leaving Paris virtually defenseless.
What about the other half of the army?
Here's where Ragnar's true genius revealed itself. With the northern army destroyed, he ordered his men to take prisoners, specifically the highest-ranking Frankish nobles they could capture alive. What happened next was perhaps the most chilling demonstration of psychological warfare in medieval history. Ragnar had his men construct wooden stakes along the Seine, visible to both Paris and the remaining Frankish army on the south bank. Then, as King Charles and his remaining forces watched in horror from across the river, the Vikings began systematically executing their prisoners. 111 Frankish nobles died that day, their bodies displayed as a message that needed no translation.
Oh God, that's horrible.
It was calculated terror, designed to break the will of everyone watching, and it worked exactly as Ragnar intended. The psychological impact was devastating. The remaining Frankish army, seeing their comrades' fate, lost all appetite for battle. With the northern army destroyed and the southern army demoralized, Ragnar now controlled the Seine River approaches to Paris completely. On March 29th, the Viking fleet surrounded the Île de la Cité. Paris found itself completely cut off from the outside world. No food could enter, no messages could leave, no reinforcements could arrive. But Ragnar still didn't storm the city. He'd studied enough sieges to know that patience often succeeded where violence failed. His men established permanent camps on both sides of the Seine, settling in for what appeared to be a lengthy siege. Inside Paris, King Charles faced the reality that his divided strategy had failed completely. His advisors debated increasingly desperate options: surrender, a breakout attempt, or waiting for relief that might never come.
How long could Paris hold out?
That was precisely the question that tormented Charles every night. The city had perhaps weeks of supplies, maybe a month if they rationed strictly. After a week of siege, Ragnar made his move. Under a banner of truce, his representatives approached the city walls with an offer that would echo through medieval history. The terms were simple and devastating. Ragnar would spare Paris and withdraw his army in exchange for 7,000 pounds of silver. In today's currency, scholars estimate this ransom at roughly $40 million, an unprecedented sum that would bankrupt the royal treasury. King Charles's advisors frantically calculated whether the kingdom even possessed such wealth.
7,000 pounds of silver? Where would they even get that much?
That was exactly the problem. The demand was carefully calculated, large enough to cripple the Frankish economy, yet small enough that it might theoretically be possible to raise. Charles faced the most difficult decision of his reign: pay the ransom and beggar his kingdom, or refuse and watch Paris burn with thousands of innocent lives lost. His military advisors counseled defiance. They argued that paying would only encourage future Viking raids, marking the Frankish Empire as a source of easy wealth. But his civilian administrators understood the mathematics of survival. Paris contained thousands of civilians who had no part in this conflict. Women, children, elderly, and clergy would all die if the Vikings stormed the city. The king spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with choices that offered no good outcomes.
What did he decide?
On April 4th, 845, white banners appeared on Paris's walls. King Charles the Bald had agreed to pay Ragnar's ransom in full. What followed was one of the most extensive wealth transfers in medieval history. Charles's agents scoured the kingdom, emptying royal treasuries, church coffers, and noble estates. The logistics alone were staggering. 7,000 pounds of silver required dozens of wagons to transport, with each load carefully weighed and verified by both Frankish and Viking representatives. Contemporary accounts describe Ragnar's meticulous attention to the ransom's details. He understood that this precedent would define Viking-Frankish relations for generations. As the treasure moved toward Paris, ordinary Franks witnessed their kingdom's wealth flowing to foreign invaders.
This must have been devastating for Frankish morale.
Beyond devastating, the psychological impact was arguably worse than the financial cost. On April 6, 845, the last wagon of silver reached the Seine. Ragnar had kept his word perfectly. No attacks on Paris, no harm to civilians, no violations of the truce terms. But as his men loaded the unprecedented ransom, the true scope of his victory became clear. He had achieved something no Viking leader before him had imagined possible: the complete surrender of a major Christian kingdom without losing a single ship. The withdrawal was as methodical as everything else about the campaign. Ship by ship, Ragnar's armada moved down the Seine, carrying enough wealth to fund a dozen future expeditions. King Charles surveyed his emptied treasury and understood that everything had changed.
Did paying the ransom actually work? Did it save Paris?
In the immediate term, absolutely. But strategically, it was a catastrophe that would haunt the Frankish Empire for decades. News of Ragnar's success spread through Scandinavia like wildfire. Every chieftain and warlord now knew that Christian kingdoms would pay enormous ransoms rather than fight. Within 5 years, Viking raids intensified dramatically across Western Europe. The precedent Ragnar established became a template that other leaders eagerly copied. The Franks found themselves forced to invest enormous resources in defenses against an enemy who could strike anywhere rivers provided access. But perhaps the most significant change was psychological. The aura of Frankish invincibility, built over generations since Charlemagne, shattered completely in those few weeks on the Seine. Ragnar Lothbrok returned to Denmark as the most successful Viking leader in history. The ransom from Paris funded not just personal wealth, but the expansion of Viking influence across Northern Europe. But his true legacy wasn't financial. It was strategic. He had demonstrated that careful planning and psychological warfare could achieve what brute force never could. His sons and followers would carry these lessons forward, launching increasingly sophisticated campaigns against Christian Europe.
What happened to Charles the Bald after this?
His reign never recovered from the humiliation. The enormous ransom payment destabilized the Frankish economy for years. But worse than the financial cost was the damage to royal prestige. The Siege of Paris marked a turning point in medieval European history. The age of Charlemagne's unified Christian empire was ending, replaced by a more dangerous world where northern pagans could humble the mightiest kingdoms. Christian chroniclers struggled to understand how their divinely protected realm had been defeated by what they considered barbarians. The ransom established precedents that would define European politics for centuries. The idea that military threats could be resolved through massive payments became embedded in diplomatic practice. With the wealth from Paris, Viking civilization entered a golden age of expansion and cultural development. Modern historians recognize the Siege of Paris as one of history's most successful military campaigns. Ragnar achieved total victory without fighting a major battle, demonstrating strategic thinking centuries ahead of his time. Archaeological evidence confirms the scope of Viking influence following Ragnar's success. The psychological aspects of the campaign remain studied by military theorists today. His combination of overwhelming force, calculated brutality, and diplomatic precision created a template for asymmetric warfare. But perhaps most remarkably, Ragnar understood that lasting victory required more than conquest. It required changing his enemy's fundamental assumptions about power and vulnerability.
So he really changed the entire balance of power in Europe?
Completely and permanently. The 7,000 pounds of silver was just the beginning. His success triggered an age of Viking expansion that would reshape European civilization for the next 2 centuries. In the end, the Siege of Paris revealed fundamental truths about power, strategy, and human nature that transcend its historical moment. Ragnar Lothbrok proved that a smaller force, intelligently led and strategically focused, could humble the greatest empire of its age. The Frankish chroniclers who recorded these events struggled to comprehend how their Christian kingdom had been brought low by northern pagans. But from our modern perspective, we can see that Ragnar's victory represented more than successful extortion. It demonstrated sophisticated understanding of economics, psychology, and international relations that wouldn't be systematically studied for centuries. The 7,000 pounds of silver bought more than Viking withdrawal. It purchased a new understanding of how power operates in a complex world. And perhaps that's the most lasting lesson of Ragnar Lothbrok's extraordinary campaign. That true strategic genius lies not in the ability to destroy one's enemies, but in the wisdom to make them choose their own defeat. Our story ends here, but the echoes of the past continue. Your voice guides where we travel next. Leave a comment with the events or figures you'd like to explore, and subscribe to join this growing fellowship of medieval storytellers.